Here today with Dr. Garth Nicholson, President and Chief Scientific Officer at the Institute for Molecular Medicine in California. Dr. Nicholson, great to be with you today.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Let's talk about hydrogen and the health benefits thereof. So first off, what is hydrogen?
Hydrogen is the simplest and most abundant element found in the universe. It is present on Earth as a biatomic form, H2, and it's present in a number of different environments here on Earth.
So I understand there's different forms of hydrogen.
Well, primarily hydrogen is present as this bimolecular molecule. It is associated with a number of different environments. So it can be found, for example, in petroleum deposits. It can be found as a free hydrogen gas. And it can be found complexed in a number of different environments. For example, hydrogen dissolved in water.
So what is hydrogen? It's the most abundant element in the universe. It's also the simplest element. It contains one proton and one electron. And that's why we like to show it in a very simplified format. It's a colorless, odorless, tasteless, non-toxic gas found in nature, as I mentioned, as H2. And you find H2 naturally. It's naturally in the soil. It's naturally in small amounts in the water. It's naturally, there's a very minute amount in the air that we breathe. But you can find higher amounts, for example, in oil wells or in deposits at the bottom of the sea that have trapped hydrogen. So it is available on our Earth as H2, so we know it as H2. Turns out it's a powerful antioxidant, but not too powerful. And this was one of the principal findings that was made in Japan by Professor Ota. He did an amazing study where he found that not only was hydrogen an antioxidant, that is, it was able to neutralize oxidative capacity in the cell, and I'll show you what that means in just a moment, but it was not too powerful because there's some very natural oxidants in our cells which are very important for signaling in the cell and for regulation of gene expression, so regulating our genes and so on. So it's important if we use an antioxidant that it's not too powerful. So it can neutralize or reduce very dangerous oxidants in our cells, and these dangerous oxidants account for a number of different problems, particularly in chronic illnesses. We have an excess of these produced in both acute and chronic illnesses. So it's something that we have to maintain control over in terms of maintaining control over our health. And the important thing, as I mentioned, hydrogen does not interfere with the signaling systems within the cell. So there's some very minor oxidants in the cell that are important in signaling and controlling gene regulation and so on. We don't want to interfere with those because that can cause catastrophic.
So Dr. Nicholson, what are some different ways that we can take hydrogen into our bodies, and which methods would be most advantageous?
Well, we can take in hydrogen in a number of different ways. We can take it in as a gas, for example. We can take it in as a saline mix, or we can take it in as hydrogen-enriched water. Now, by far the simplest way to take in hydrogen is with hydrogen-enriched water, just by ingesting it, just by drinking.
So Dr. Nicholson, one of the big questions I wanted to ask you today is, what are some of the health benefits of hydrogen?
Probably the most dramatic health benefit is the fact that hydrogen is a very good antioxidant. So during problems with our health, for example, or during aging, or during other situations, acute and chronic illnesses, we overproduce oxidants in our system. And hydrogen is a very effective way of reducing the effects of those oxidants. It's also a very strong anti-inflammatory agent. And so there are a number of different ways that hydrogen can benefit us in terms of our health.
Well, the health benefits of hydrogen sound exciting, but is it safe?
Oh, it's absolutely safe. You know, one of the exciting properties of hydrogen, particularly in hydrogen-enriched water, is that it is extremely safe. You know, hydrogen has been used for a long time, many, many years, in commercial diving, for example, where divers have been exposed to long periods of time to hydrogen, much higher concentrations than we actually see in hydrogen-enriched water. So its safety record is absolutely excellent.
So hydrogen is extremely safe. You know, and this is one of the things that we can all say about hydrogen, is it is very, 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 very safe. And in fact, before I went to college, I worked as a professional diver. And we actually use hydrogen in our gas mixtures for deep diving. And it's been used commercially in deep diving for many, many years. Ever since the 1930s, they've been experimenting with different gas mixtures to prevent decompression sickness, or the bends, in professional divers who work for long periods of time at great depth. So hydrogen has been put in the mixture with helium and oxygen, mostly not only to delete out the oxygen, but also to provide other properties as well. And so one of the more popular mixtures for deep diving is a mixture of hydrogen, helium, and oxygen, removing completely the nitrogen. So obviously it's safe because of the use of hydrogen since the 30s in a high pressure environment. So the partial pressure of hydrogen is much, much higher than it is in ambient use. And so if it had any possibility of causing harm, we would have known about it over the years from thousands and thousands of professional divers that have used hydrogen in the mixtures of gas. So its safety record is well documented in gas mixtures, and there's been no safety issues in all these years. It's extremely safe when used in water, like hydrogen water. And of course, here we have hydrogen water. And has there ever been a case of damage of anybody from hydrogen water? No. It's very, very safe. And I think that's another thing that you can brag about with hydrogen water. It is completely safe to use, completely safe to consume. And
Dr. Nicholson, how did the research into hydrogen begin?
Well, research into hydrogen has been ongoing for a number of years, but I think the most interesting discovery was made in Japan by Professor Ota in Tokyo, where they actually found that hydrogen was an excellent antioxidant. And from those studies on, we and other people have been investigating the role of hydrogen, not only as an antioxidant, but as an anti-inflammatory agent.
inflammation and autoimmunity. Now, one of the things that hydrogen could do is reduce inflammation. And so there are a number of diseases associated with it. I've just listed a few examples here. Inflammatory bowel diseases, inflammatory muscle diseases, arteriosclerosis, for example. The list goes on and on. But hydrogen can be useful in reducing inflammation. So as a general health property, it can reduce inflammation. And there's some other autoimmune diseases that have inflammation as an aspect of the disease, like rheumatoid arthritis, sarcoidosis, and so on, multiple sclerosis. All these are very debilitating diseases. And what we want to do is help provide healthy cells and tissues. And that's what hydrogen helps to do. In inflammation, for example, one of the things that happens in inflammation is that cells, immune cells that are in the blood, receive signals from a wound site, and they respond to those signals, and they invade out of the blood vessel, and they normally elicit a response to that wounding environment, and they produce what are known as inflammatory cytokines. And these inflammatory cytokines are just signals. They signal cells and tissues and so on to try and initiate the repair process and try and warn other cells that there's something going on here. There's infection, for example, in a wound, or other problems associated with the wound. And so one of the things that can happen is this can get out of hand, and this inflammation can cause tremendous problems. So you want to try and control the inflammation as much as possible. And so hydrogen helps in that regard. And here's the situation, rheumatoid arthritis, where inflammation of the joints is a major problem. It's not the only problem with rheumatoid arthritis. There are lots of other problems associated with rheumatoid arthritis, but at least the inflammation part of it is helped by using hydrogen. So there's a study here that I'm quoting with 20 patients with rheumatoid arthritis that drank hydrogen-enriched water for 12 weeks, and the hydrogen-enriched water reduced the markers found in the blood for rheumatoid arthritis, reduced the symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, and it turns out the patients with early RA, early rheumatoid arthritis, actually responded better than the patients that have had arthritis for a long time. Well, that's understandable because there's less damage, permanent damage, in early patients compared to late patients.
How would you explain the ability of hydrogen to get into cells?
You know, hydrogen has this very natural property where it can dissolve into and move across cell membranes. And of course, cell membranes separate every cell in our body And even the central nervous system, which is separated by the blood-brain barrier, hydrogen can penetrate that. So essentially, hydrogen can get into any compartment within our body.
And I know this is one of your areas of expertise that you've spent decades.
Well, it's true. I mean, the cell membranes, for example, is that's one of my important topics that we developed in the early 70s. But I must say that hydrogen is a very, very interesting molecule in terms of its ability to penetrate not only into cells, but into the organelles inside cells and passing through various membranes. And therefore, it can virtually go everywhere in your body. And I think that's important for its health benefits.
So we talk about the hydrogen getting through the cell membrane, et cetera, and we talk about hydrogen being an antioxidant. I know there's a lot of antioxidants out there. Is hydrogen different?
Well, it is, and it can penetrate very easily into every compartment of a cell, and that's not true for most other antioxidants. But there's another property of hydrogen which makes it unique, and that's that it's not an overly strong antioxidant. Some antioxidants are so strong that they suppress all oxidants within a cell, and I'm telling you that that is not good, because some minor oxidants are very important in terms of cell signaling and gene regulation, and so we don't want to affect those processes in our cells. And so hydrogen doesn't affect those processes. It really goes after the most bad or strongest oxidants in the cell and inhibits those.
Now, how does hydrogen get inside cells? Well, hydrogen has this very unique property that other antioxidants don't have. It can penetrate the cell membrane of a cell. Here's a cell, and this green barrier around here is the membrane around the cell, and hydrogen penetrates that fairly easily, and it gets into all the compartments of the cells. It gets into mitochondria, it gets into the nucleus, it gets into all these compartments of the cell, and it does that very easily. And that's a very important feature of hydrogen. So we don't have to invent fancy molecules to help get it in. It just gets in very naturally because of its structure. It will go in places where other antioxidants can't. And a good example of that is the central nervous system, which has a barrier around it called the blood-brain barrier, which prevents a lot of molecules from freely flowing in to our brains. Well, hydrogen can flow in through the blood-brain barrier very easily. So it's a very unique molecule in that respect, because there are not too many things that can